All right, so in Access, you will come across a couple of scenarios. One in which you have to import a file, two in which you have to create a database, three, you have to create a database and then you have to add data to your database. Okay. So we are going to look at the first scenario, which is basically about import the file. Okay. Normalization will come later as well. But for now, you need to get done with the import process and the different objects that we do. And I recommend that you follow the workflow that I do so that there are no mistakes and it's error free. Now the exam scenario says using a suitable database package, import this file. The file name is j10kites.csv, which is a comma separated value file. Comma separated value file is basically a generic file format. The examiner sends you this file because examiner does not know which operating system you are using. And this particular file can be accessed on any of the operating system, whether it be Linux, whether it be Mac OS or Windows operating system. So they normally send you the generic file format. Now, in order to import, you will obviously have to open up Access. Once Access opens up, you will get to see the option of blank database. So you click on it. This is very important. Step number one, where you're going to save the database and the name of your database. Students, they tend to skip this part and they don't even know where the database is saved by default. So usually when you create a database, they are saved in your documents. You can see by default, it is basically being saved in your database, users Munib documents. The name of the file is basically this. So let's say I'm going to change it to and I want to change the location of the file as well. So I will click on the browse and I will set, let's say, my desktop to be the place where I'm going to save this database. Unlike other applications such as Word, Microsoft Access starts from saving the file. So your file will always be saved. All you need to do is control S at different times whenever you want to save your database. Otherwise, it is generally saved before you start working in it. After you have named the file, browse, set the location, you just click on create. Now this is the interface of your database. On the top, you have the menu bar, then you have the ribbon section. On the left hand side, you have the objects. So you will have objects like tables, queries, reports, forms. Whatever you actually make will be listed over here. On the right hand side, this is basically a blank table, just like Microsoft Word. When you open up a blank document or a new document, it's a blank page. Over here, it's a database. We will deal with fields and records. So it's in a form of a table which has columns and rows. So generally there is blank. Now, since we are covering the scenario of importing, we don't actually need to have this blank table because our data is already present in another file, which we are to import. Another very important point, just keep this in mind. Okay, if you are not working with a particular object, which is table, query, report, okay? If you're not working in that object, do not have it opened up in front of you. Just keep in mind. Okay? When we proceed, when we go advanced set to A-level difficulty, you will also get to know that you'll have multiple objects onto the left-hand side. and they are not to be opened up if you are not working in them. So I'm going to close this. As you can see, it disappeared from here because we are not basically concerned about the blank table. We are going to import. In order to import, you are going to go to external data. You've got two option groups, import and link, export. So you drop down new data source from file. You have the option of Excel and you have the option of text file. We are going to click on the text file. Why? Because a CSV format is a generic format. Generic format can only be detected by clicking on the text file. However, if I show you the file actually on my computer, this is the J10Kites file. If I double click on it, it opens up in Excel. Again, Excel supports the CSV format, which is why by default the file opens up in Excel. Let's review this file. We have several columns, A, B, C up until I. You have the column headings on the top. So you have make, model, size, price, skill level, win condition, use, number, stock. Excel has the capability to access the CSV, which is why the data is being laid out in columns and rows. If I open this data, I'll right click on it, I'll go to open with and click on notepad. Look at how the data appears. Comma separated value, CSV. So values in each row, they are separated by a comma. Wherever you get to see a comma, the data is going to be separated. Does it make sense? So after make, there is a comma. After model, there is a comma. Size, comma. Price, there is a space and then a comma. Skill level, space, level, comma. Win condition, comma. Use, comma, number, stock item. So keep this space in mind. After price, we have a space. Okay. Just keep this in mind that we have a space after price in the original data. Okay. Now, wherever the comma is, when we open this file in Excel, it separates the data wherever the comma was detected. So make, there was a comma, separated, model, comma, separated, size, comma, separated. What about price? Price, there was a space. If I double click in the cell, you can see that there is still the space. And then there was a comma, so which is why it separated it into a different column. Do we get this? Okay. Now, coming back, in Access, in order to import a CSV, we need to click on New Data Source, from File, Text File. I'll be discussing this import process in detail, so be very attentive. This will be helpful for the people who have done it in O levels, or if they don't have a background, this is what it is. First of all, you need to locate the file which you need to open. So you click on Browse, you locate your file, which is J10Kites, and we click on Open. So you can see that this was present in users, Munib desktop, access ex1, J10Kites.csv. This is the file we've gone to import. At the bottom, you have two options. What you can do with this file. One, import the source data into a new table in the current database. The current database that you saved. You saved before you started working, right? So it will be imported as a new table in your database. The second part is link to the data source by creating a linked table. So it can be linked to another table if you want. Do we have any other object? No, we only have a blank database. So what we're going to do is we're going to import this data as a new table and we click on OK. Once you click on OK, Access will read the file, analyze it, will give you a preview at all times at the bottom section. And this is basically what we're dealing with, import text wizard. So it will guide you through all the process or all the steps. The first point says your data seems to be in a delimited format. If it isn't, choose the format that more correctly describes your data. Now the question is, what's a delimited format? यहाँ पे उसने list किया हुआ है that delimited is characters such as a comma or tab separates each field. Which file format do we have? Delimited. I said, which file format do we have? CSV. It's a comma separated value file. So Access already detected this as a file in which the values are separated by a comma, and that is basically a delimited file. You can also specify the separation yourself, and that will be a fixed width. Fields are aligned in columns with spaces between each field. That is beyond your scope of the study, which is why we will not be talking about the fixed width. However, we will select delimited because that's the file that we have. Click on next. Over here, it again asks you what delimiter separates your fields. Select the appropriate delimiter and see how your text is affected in the preview below. Access automatically detected that comma occurred in that file plenty of times, so probably the delimiter is set to be a comma. Do you remember the space after price? Right? After make there was no space, model no space, size no space, price there was a space. So if I select my delimiter as space, wherever Access will have, or let's say the Excel file will have a space in it, the data is going to be separated at that point, which was after price. And then look at skill level. Between skill level, there is a space. Between win condition, there is a space. So if I select the delimiter as space, wherever the space was originally, the data is going to be separated from that point. Do we all get this? So whatever select or whatever delimiter you select, you need to keep an eye on the preview below. Yes, it's a comma separated value file. Comma separates each field. So we will select comma. Another very important thing that the students tend to skip when they're importing a file, they don't check whether the first row is containing the field names or not. Field names, field headings. So in this case, we have make, model, size, price, skill level, win condition, use. So these are the field names. So we will select this option which says first row contains the field names. I will talk about the text qualifier at a later stage when we get to have those scenarios. Okay, for now, you don't have to worry about it. Once this is selected, we click on next. Now the import wizard wants you to set the properties for each field. It says you can specify information about each of the fields you are importing. Select fields in the area below. You can then modify field information in the field options area. This is the field options area. And you have 4 settings for each field. If you want to set the settings for size, you need to click on it. If you want to change the settings for use, you need to click on it. Okay. So one by one, you are to set the settings. In the settings, you have 4 options. 1, you can specify the field name. 2, you can specify the data type. 3, whether you want it to be indexed or not. Indexed meaning that you want to have a sequence. And last, do not import or skip. So if you select this particular field will not be imported. The rest of the data is going to be imported. Do we all get this?
Yes, sir.
Achha. Now this information is already given by the examiner that make needs to be text. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to select make and we are going to set the data type to be short text. Short text is good for any field which has up until 256 characters. Beyond 256 characters, you are to select long text. Do we have long text? Over here. So for A levels, you won't find any data which is going to go beyond 256 characters. So text means short text. It depends on different scenarios. The scenario at which you are going to be tested, you won't get any scenario in which you have to select long text. No matter what. No. Acha. Now, model. Model needs to be text. So we'll select model and we set the data type to be text. Size. Numeric / 1 decimal place. Size. Numeric / 1 decimal place. There is a decimal place detected within the data. So whenever Access detects decimal places in numbers, it automatically sets it as double. You won't find an option for real number here. It's either going to be a single or a double. Single is for only single decimal places. Double is basically going beyond that as well. You will not set the decimal places during the import process. You cannot do it. Okay. So we'll keep it as double because double is good for decimal places. For price, they have mentioned that it needs to be currency with 2 decimal places. So we do have a data type for currency. We will select price. As you can see, Access detected a decimal place. So Access specified double as the data type. However, for price, we are to set this as currency. Decimal places are going to be set later. Decimal places are going to be set later. This is basically the Access detection that it's a double. We don't know whether it's going to be a single decimal place or more than that. Numbers, right? Number of characters की बात हो रही है. Skill level, short text. As you can see, there are only alphabets. Win condition, short text. Use, short text. Because short text is basically catering to not only just alphabets, but also special symbols or numbers. You remember the alphanumeric? You remember the alphanumeric? So alphanumeric, you don't have an option over here. We only have short text or long text. Number. Number is said to be numeric / integer. Do you see any decimal places? No. Access also did not detect any decimal places, which is why it has kept it as a long integer. Got this? Integers are whole numbers. You have integer and you have long integer. Last of all, the stock item. Stock item is mentioned as Boolean or logical. Is that so? Yes. Boolean or logical, you don't have a data type. You only select yes or no. This is representing Boolean data type. So you select it as yes or no. Now you can do this process while staying on this screen and selecting each field, or you can also go to your advanced. Over here, one thing is very important to check. That is your date order. Your date order will always or should always be DMY. That is the format which UK follows. So the files that you get, the files the examiner send you, they are basically formatted or encoded on UK format, which is why your date order will have to be DMY always. That's MDY. In US, they prefer mentioning the month first and then the date. So DMY. And you can also set the fields and the data types from here. It's the same. But I recommend that you do it over here by looking at the data and then specifying the data type accordingly. This is an O-level scenario, which is why the data types are given. In A-levels, they will ask you to mention or keep the data types as per your own choice. You just need to specify an appropriate field name and data type. So for that, you need to look at the data, examine the data. Based on the data, you're going to set the data type. Click on next. Then it says Microsoft recommends that you define a primary key for your new table. Primary key is basically what? The identifier of the table. We talked about it. Relational database, primary keys and foreign keys. Anyways, we'll come back to the foreign key and the primary key concept as well. Right now, it's not a relational database. It's only one table that we are trying to import. But what's important is that Microsoft Access recommends that you define a primary key for your new table. A primary key is uniquely identify each record in your table. Just like student ID. Achha. It allows you to retrieve data more quickly. Now you have three options. You can set the primary key by access. You can choose your own primary key. If you select this option, you will have all the fields listed here. You can select one of the fields and set it as a primary key, or you can even go with no primary key. Keep this in mind. Primary keys are important when you have relational database. Multiple tables are to be imported. If you're only working with one table, it's not even necessary. You may or may not. Even the examiner says you may add another field as a primary key field if your software requires this. So if I was working in any other software which there is a criteria or there's a requirement that I need to specify the primary key, then I must. But Microsoft Access gives us the option to not go with the primary key. Or we can add it automatically by Access, or we can specify our own. So you have three options. I'll go with no primary key because we are not importing multiple tables, not making a relational database. Click on next. That's all the information the wizard needs to import your data. So you need to specify the name for this file. I would say this is kites. And then click on finish. It says get external data text file, finished importing this. Do you want to save these import steps? No, you're not going to check this. And just click on close. Why you don't want to check this? Because you will be importing multiple files which may require different settings. So you don't want these settings to be applied to that file. So you're not going to import them or save them, and you just click on close. Once you click on close, your table is going to be listed onto the left hand side. If I double click on it, you get to see your data which is imported. If during the process you set a data type which is not acceptable for a particular field, you will get to have import errors. What will you have? Import errors. Whenever you are importing one file, it should appear as just one table. If there was a scenario of import errors, I would have gotten two objects over here, one for kites and one as kite import errors. So since I've done the process correctly, there are no errors. My data import process is not complete as yet because I still have to do a number of settings. I had to set the price to 1 decimal place. I had to set the size to 1 decimal place, price to 2 decimal place, and stock item to yes or no. Right now, this object, what you see in front of you, this is basically called its data sheet view. Data sheet. Sheet comes from Excel. Data is basically the data is present. So data sheet. Data is presented in the sheet form. If you click on home, at the very start you have the view options. You drop it down, you've got two views of the same data, of the same object. One is the data sheet, one is the design view. Keep this in mind. Design view is basically used for advanced settings of your object. Right now the object is a table. You got this? Design view क्या होगा? Advanced settings होगी of your object. Object कौन सा है? Table है. You can click design view like this. You're gonna even right click over here on the object tab. Design view over here. You can right click here. You have design view here. So there are three ways to go to your design view. We'll head over to our design view and have a look. This has a different database interface to it. You have the kites, the field names are mentioned, data types mentioned. On the right hand side, you get to have the property sheet, which is activated from the table design property sheet. This is activated. And at the bottom, you have the field properties section. So you have field properties over here. Each field will have its own field properties. You had to set size as 1 decimal place, right? So you can click on size over here, over here, over here, or like this. You just need to make sure that your cursor clicks in that row. Once size is selected, you come down to your field properties and you will see decimal places. So if I double click on it, it is set to 1. You want to switch, double click again, it will keep on switching. You can even type it, or you can even drop the options to select a decimal place. Decimal place is set. Now you want to check whether it is applied to your data or not. So you need to go back to your data sheet. You made a change in the field properties, drop it down, click on data sheet. It will ask you to save changes. Yes, I want to save changes, so we click on yes. Have a look at the size field. Are they appearing in 1 decimal place? Some are appearing as whole numbers, some are appearing in 1 decimal place. So I want the whole data to be displayed in 1 decimal place. We go back to our design view, come back, decimal place is set to 1. Now we want to force the format to be 1 decimal place. So under format, we're going to drop it down and we select fixed. What will fixed do? Fixed will force the settings onto your data. Now if you go back to your data sheet, save changes, you will see that the size is appearing in 1 decimal place. Do we all get this? Price needs to be 2 decimal place. Now by default, currency fields are automatically set to 2 decimal places. But even if you have to do it, you know where to go. You are going to click on design view, click on the price, come down under the field properties, under decimal places. We are going to set this to 2 decimal place. And in order to apply the changes, you need to go back to your datasheet view so that the changes can be saved, and then you can review your data. Last thing to do, stock item needs to appear as yes or no. It is appearing as checkboxes. If I scroll down, you can see some are checked, some are not. The ones which are not checked, that means it's a no. The ones which are checked, that means it's a yes. But they are not appearing as yes or no. So we need to fix this. We come back to our design view. We click on stock item over here, 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 or like this. It's up to you. So I will click on the stock item, come down to the field properties. You won't get to see any settings to change the checkbox from here. You will have to go on to this tab which says lookup. And over here it says display control checkbox, which needs to be text box. It needs to be text box. Once you have changed this setting, go back to your datasheet view, save your changes, and you will see that the stock item is appearing as yes or no. Now, in some cases, it may not change. In some cases, it may not change. Even if you go to your design view, in the general tab, the format, can you see the format? It is displayed as yes or no. Sometimes the format is set to yes, no. Sometimes the display control is also text box, but the data does not appear in yes or no format. In those cases, you are to ignore it. Let it be. Okay? So this was how you import a particular file into your database. All the files have to go through the same process. No matter how many files you are to import, they are going to go through external data, new data, from file, text file. Consider a scenario that I have to import the file again, or I need to import another file. The very first step that you need to do, close the objects that you are not working in. You should have nothing opened up in front of you. And then you go external data, new data, from file, text file, browse, select your file, click on OK. It will be imported as a new table, and then follow through the process. Delimited, check whether the first row has the column headings or not, set the data type, set their formats, set a primary key if needed, and then click on finish. Open the data sheet, examine the data, analyze it, set the properties by field properties, and then you'll be good to go. Right? Simple method, simple steps. Just keep the workflow in mind and cross-check everything. Do not do it very quickly, otherwise you will make mistakes during the import process.